and welcome to Talking Europe, this time brought to you from both sides of the Irish border, the frontier which has been at the eye of the Brexit storm. Here I'm standing just on the edge of the Republic of Ireland to the south, but across the other side of that river lies Northern Ireland, part of the UK. And as things stand, this is an open border. There are no checks on any of the people or goods passing through on the many roads that cross the border, as decreed under the Good Friday Agreement. And that's been vital for the communities here. Some 40,000 people cross the border every single day. And in terms of farming, 325,000 sheep, 55,000 cattle and 813 million litres of milk are transported across the border every year. Agriculture is a hugely important sector in Northern Ireland's economy. There are some 25,000 farms covering 3/4 of the land here. And many farms actually straddle the Irish border itself. Our reporter Clovis Casali has been to meet some of those who work the land across that divide.
Joe Parker crosses the border several times a day. He doesn't really have a choice.
Well, what you're seeing here is my farm in Southern Ireland. And when you look there, straight across the water, there's a misty day today, you mightn't be able to see too well. Just in the other side of the water is my farm in Northern Ireland.
Joe regrets not voting in the Brexit referendum as he fears his life will soon change. He's envisaging selling his land in the south if a physical border is set up with all its administrative burdens.
I cross the bridge in the springtime maybe 15 times a day, back and forward with vets and different things, and telehandler to feed my animals. That I'm not sure where I lie there with even the sheepdog in the back of the Jeep. Is he allowed to come with me? Am I allowed to bring an injection from a vet in Northern Ireland? I don't know. Nobody knows what's down the line, what's coming down the tracks.
John Sheridan also lives at the border. Our teams met him 1 year after the referendum. At the time, he described the situation with a pinch of humour.
This dog, he had no licence to cross the border, so he'll have to go to jail now. He's an illegal immigrant.
Today, his tone has changed. John knows better than most how torn the region was during the Troubles. He lived through decades of sectarian violence, border checks and humiliations.
Times to be touchy enough with customers and say, well, I want the whole van cleared out. They could just ask you here at the customs office to just clear the whole stuff onto the road. And then they'd leave you sitting on the road and you'd have to put the whole stuff back in yourself. Crazy.
As we cross this old stone bridge, we leave the Republic of Ireland and enter Northern Ireland. With its British post office, national lottery signs and money exchanges, Belcoo looks like any typical UK town. For decades, troops were stationed here and the barracks were attacked several times by Irish nationalists. The violence and killings haunt the local communities.
When the customs posts left and the barracks came down, everybody had a sense of freedom which they had never, some of them never before in their lifetime. And we see Brexit just as something which will ruin our peace and has the potential to ruin our economy as well. And we don't want one bit of it.
The border stretches over 500 kilometres with numerous crossing points used by trucks transporting all kinds of goods. Thomas Murphy often travels to France to pick up apples destined for the Northern Irish market. He's worried at the prospect of a return of customs checks.
It'll add hours to delays, to delivery times, cost, extra time waiting, sitting around, pay drivers more money. Everything is just going to be a complete disaster.
Food and beverages represent 45% of Irish exports to Northern Ireland. So Dublin looked at ways to cope with the effects of Brexit before the result of the referendum even came in.
We receive over 80% of our flour for our baked goods from Northern Ireland. A lot of our beverage companies are actually sending their product up to the north for centralised bottling and kegging, bringing them back down again for distribution. So this is as much of a supply chain complexity story as it is an export dependency story.
54% of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union. And the question of the border has been at the heart of negotiations between London and EU member states. Europe played a part in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, and like all parties involved, wants to avoid a hard border both in the name of peace and to protect the single market.
To talk more about the concerns of Northern Irish farmers, we've come here to Dublin. Now, you might think it's unusual that we've come to the Republic of Ireland to do so, but that's because we're meeting with the first ever elected Irish senator, who's also a unionist, born and bred in the north, Ian Marshall. Thanks for meeting with us. Nice to meet you. First of all, can you just explain that point to us? How does a unionist from Northern Ireland become an Irish senator?
Yeah, well, I was asked to run in a Senate by-election. I was nominated by the Taoiseach and subsequently ran in the election and was duly elected and now serve, as you say, as a senator in the Irish Senate.
So you've got a good perspective on both sides of the border. I mean, you're also the former president of the Ulster Farmers Union. How do you think Brexit will affect farmers?
I think it's interesting because Brexit is the one area of industry and business that is most seriously affected. And all the academic studies I've read and I've looked at and examined, there's still no solutions for agriculture and agri-food. It's inextricably linked between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland.
Which are the most affected sectors?
Most affected are probably our dairy industry and our beef industry. And remember, companies that trade and own businesses on both sides of the border that on a daily basis move dairy produce from farms to processors and back to retailers. So it's bounced backwards and forwards across the border onto GB and further into the European markets.
And yet, many farmers in Northern Ireland voted to leave the EU in 2016. How do you explain that?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that's the message that's portrayed, but I'm a farmer, I have lots of friends who are farmers, and many farmers voted to remain, and Northern Ireland voted to remain. So I think it's maybe slightly misleading to think that all farmers voted to leave because most recognise the value of being in Europe.
Not all, but some did, and we heard people speaking out at the time of the referendum. I mean, how do you explain that they were voting to leave when it's clearly having these serious consequences or people having serious fears already?
Well, I think when we look back to the referendum, remember this started about ideology. It started with ideology and lots of misleading information. So, and it's not being disrespectful. Many people thought initially that we're better to Brexit. I think if you ask the same question, many people have changed their position.
Now, you yourself cross the border very frequently. You're based between Dublin and Belfast. Many farmers cross the border on a daily basis. Is it actually possible, do you think, to reimpose a hard border?
Well, it's interesting because I'm old enough to remember a hard border. I live and farm quite close to the border. And actually, it was a serious inconvenience. It inconvenienced families, businesses, and it was difficult. We've had 20 years in the absence of any tangible border, even though it's two separate jurisdictions. So the thought of returning to that fills me with horror.
Now, a lot of politicians in London, you hear them saying things like, the UK is a great country, we've come through worse than this before, we'll find a way. Don't you think Northern Irish farmers will just be able to pull through?
There is no question that whatever happens, the sky will not fall in. We will have trade, we will have business. However, what you have to remember is that it's going to create logistical issues, it's going to create timing issues, it's going to create cost issues, it's going to create inconvenience. And my question would be, why would we do this?
Do you think that the unification of the island of Ireland, that Northern Ireland no longer being part of the UK, could be possible as a result of Brexit?
Certainly unification has come back into this discussion. I think it's unhelpful because I believe it's a separate discussion to that of Brexit. It's been introduced primarily by Sinn Féin, left-wing Republican Party, whose mantra, whose raison d'etre is to unify the island of Ireland. So I think it's unhelpful, but it certainly can change that discussion over the long term, with many people questioning if the UK leave, are they better served being members of Europe or within the UK?
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Ian Marshall.
Thank you.
Now, it's not only farmers in Northern Ireland who are concerned about Brexit. Farmers here in the Republic of Ireland are bracing themselves for turbulence too. Agriculture is the biggest sector of the Irish economy. It exports most of its produce and its largest market is the UK. Beef farmers are particularly concerned. They export more than half their meat to British markets. Clovis Casali has been to meet some of those farmers on the front line.
Large farming companies would like to get their hands on Aidan Kavanagh's land, but he has no desire to sell, even if he's working hard to make ends meet. He's inherited these fields in County Wexford, perfect for his grazing livestock.
Green grass is our goal. As you can see, they're very contented here. We feed very little concentrates, which is good for the environment, and the main thing is to keep them happy, and I think that pays off then the beef, what comes out of.
More than half of Irish beef is exported to the United Kingdom. That's €1 billion in exports a year. So Brexit is a serious source of concern for farmers like Aidan, who's meeting with a buyer.
Yeah, at least it's dry.
The winter is coming, huh?
Yeah.
So
that's Ireland
you
for
said to Andy, you have about 10 cows to sell.
I have 10 fat cows here, yeah. There's a couple of Charolais, Montbellards and Angus cows.
So you're just finishing.
Aidan's meat goes to prestigious British butchers. Still, the price he's currently getting is disappointing.
€3 a kilo.
€3.
Which is, I know it's a lot less than last year.
Yeah, I was expecting a good bit more now, yeah.
You know, it's about 40 cents a kilo
That's
less.
40 or 50 cents a kilo less, yeah.
Brexit is giving us headaches at the moment.
Oh, right, yeah.
The industry is already suffering from Brexit, with uncertainty rising and prices dropping. Frenchman Arnaud Clopin was recruited for his experience and his language skills.
There's so much uncertainty with Brexit that we at Kavanagh Meats are looking for new markets. Before, 40% of our business was in the UK. Now it's just 27%. Ever since I was hired, we've been trying to set foot in the French, Belgian, German, Luxembourg and Dutch markets.
Aidan has finished work and a friend has come by for a cup of tea. As always, the Irish Farmers newspaper is on the table, and many of the articles look at the impact of Brexit.
A lot of farmers are talking about scaling back on a high level, and an awful lot of farmers are even thinking about exiting the beef industry altogether. An awful lot of guys will go part-time work and become part-time farmers. Unfortunately, when a farmer goes part-time, he rarely ever goes back to be a full-time farmer again. And the fabric of rural Ireland would change in that.
Oh, yeah.
The Irish meat industry has been following closely the Brexit negotiations. Exporters like Aidan have suffered from the pound falling in recent weeks. They hope to continue in the future to sell as much meat as before to the UK at a decent price and without high tariffs.
Talk more about the concerns of Irish farmers over Brexit. I've come to meet Angus Woods of the Irish Farmers Association. Hi there, Angus.
Good morning.
How many members do you represent?
Approximately 73, maybe 73,500 members, right across all the different farming sectors across Ireland.
And how worried would you say Irish farmers are about the prospect of Brexit?
Oh, Brexit is the really number one concern amongst Irish farmers at the moment. The UK is our main export market, it's our nearest neighbour. Part of the UK is part of the island of Ireland, so we have internal border issues as well too. So it's hugely important for Irish farmers.
What help do you think Irish farmers need? What are you asking for to compensate for the impact of Brexit?
It's almost impossible to predict what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we have been working in that environment for the last 2 years.
All right, Angus, we're going to go now and look at some of your cattle on another part of your farm.
Yes, that's perfect. Beef is the part that we're most concerned about in Ireland.
So what kind of cattle do you have here, Angus?
Yeah, so on the right-hand side here, we have beef heifers. They're kind of 10 to 12 months of age. We tend to crossbreed quite a bit in Ireland, so we have a combination here of Angus heifers and we have Charolais heifers as well.
For the beef sector in particular, why is Brexit such a big deal?
For Irish beef, Brexit is critically important. Last year in 2018, we exported 298,000 tonnes of beef into the UK, 250,000 tonnes of beef into continental Europe, and 25,000 tonnes of beef into the rest of the world. So the UK market is massive for us. It's also our highest paying market as well too. So if we can't access that market, we'll have to find new markets somewhere else.
Why can't you just take the beef that you've been exporting to the UK and sell that elsewhere in Europe?
Yeah, look, we can do that, is the simple answer. We can do that, but it will have really serious implications for all the other European producers, because we'll end up saturating the whole European market. It'll impact not just on beef prices, it'll impact on pork and poultry prices. The whole protein market would be pushed down, and it would make European farmers economically unviable. Politicians are very good at saying, well, we'll go to China and we'll get a new market, or we'll go to Japan, open a new market. But those markets aren't waiting to accept 300,000 tonnes of beef just overnight. It's unrealistic to expect a new market to open up overnight to take that.
Angus Woods of the Irish Farmers Association, thank you very much for having us and showing us around your farm. And we're going to wrap up this first part of Talking Europe here in the Irish countryside, but do join us just after the break. We'll be heading to Northern Ireland, to Belfast for much more. See you soon.
France 24, c'est la richesse de la diversité culturelle mondiale, avec un réseau de correspondants à travers la planète.
En France 24 en español comunicamos a Latinoamérica con el mundo entero.
روح مهنية شعارها واحد، حرية التعبير. هذه هي بصمة France 24.
Africa on France 24 is about its people and their stories.
Los ciudadanos nos cuentan cuáles son las iniciativas y las problemáticas que tienen en sus comunidades a través del programa Los Observadores. Eso los acerca aún más a France 24.